Welcome to Raising Daughters, the podcast that helps parents learn the best ways to support their daughters as they navigate the high levels of stress, anxiety, pressure, and uncertainty so pervasive in our culture today. Dr. Tim Jordan is a developmental and behavioral pediatrician who has specialized in counseling girls for over 30 years and sheds light on the realities of today's young women in all facets of their lives. This is your opportunity to learn how to better support your daughters, making them feel safe, secure, and truly loved in the midst of life's ups and downs. Here is your host, Dr. Tim.
Hello, friends. Dr. Tim Jordan back here with a brand new episode of Raising Daughters. I have a couple of questions for you to think about. I wonder how many of you ever worry about your daughters and their body image. And I think a lot of parents especially worry in the kind of the preteen, teenage years. I bet a lot of you also blame social media as the number one culprit on your list of reasons why there's such distorted and dissatisfaction with our bodies and with your daughter's bodies. And in this podcast today, I think I'm going to offer you some different ways of looking at body dissatisfaction. And maybe social media is not the main thing you need to focus on. In order for me to handle this topic, I decided to ask some experts who have just published a book like within the last week. So welcome to the show. So I've asked Dr. Janet Boseovski, I think I said it right,
yes.
And Dr. Ashleigh Gallagher. And they're both professors of psychology at UNC Greensboro. And Dr. Janet Boseovski is the associate editor of the Journal of Social Development. And she speaks with parenting groups and teachers and science educators about human development and also about this issue. Dr. Gallagher is a senior lecturer in the Department of Psychology at UNC Greensboro also. And she does a lot of research and teaching in areas of emotion, culture, gender. She has a lot of experience working in public policy. So these are two women who know what they're talking about. And they just published a book. It just came out a week ago called Beyond Body Positive, a mother's science-based guide for helping girls build a healthy body image. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm curious about what urged you all to write this book, other than the obvious, which is just a huge problem.
Yeah, well, we're women, certainly. So as women, body image is a topic that comes up quite a bit. And not only are we colleagues, we're friends. So we actually would go to the gym together. And, as women, you just make various observations about demands on women, expectations, kind of silly body trends that you see, and so on and so forth. But we also developed some academic interests in the topic. We had a former undergraduate student, Keston Harris, approach us to start a reading group on the topic. And we started to read about women's body image. We started to read about girls' body image, and we realized that there's a lot of information out there that moms could use, that women could use. But people hadn't really compiled the information that we have about girls and the information that we have about moms and how important moms are. And we kept on saying someone needs to write a book. And guess we were those people ultimately.
And the book is full of good research. So there's a lot of research to back up what you talk about in your book. And one of the things that I think I want parents to hear today is that I think we tend to think about body image with teenagers a lot. And that is an issue, obviously, for teenagers. But I think the concern starts a lot earlier.
Definitely. And I think that's one of the things in our conversations that sort of emerged is we were trying to put a pinpoint on when did we first start thinking about these topics. And it was really hard to remember because it seems like it's been all of our lives. And as we delved into the research, we started learning about the problems that were going on in adolescence, but that these didn't pop out of nowhere, that children as young as 5 years of age, even sometimes younger, are voicing discontent with parts of their body. So I don't like this, or I don't like this, or I wish this were different.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty shocking to us that it started that young. But then when we started thinking about other aspects of social development, it made sense.
Yeah, children have a self that's developing really early, and they're taking in, as we know, they're great observational learners, and they pick up things even sometimes when we don't want them to, such as, you have a curse word and suddenly out of nowhere, your child knows that word. Where did they learn that from, right? But, we're in a culture that emphasizes weight and appearance a lot. And they're getting this messaging very early. So it's kind of unsurprising that they're already thinking about their appearance and their weight and sort of seeing what the gender stereotypes are. So for girls, they're learning those very early. They're looking at parent attitudes. And so all of that is creating an impression, and that gets kind of integrated into their own self.
You make a great case in the book that social media obviously has a place, but mothers' roles in that are really important. About 10 years ago, my wife and I were helping to facilitate a 3-day weekend retreat. It was actually in Italy, in Lake Como, which was really nice. It was mothers and daughters, middle-aged girls and their moms from all over Europe. And there was about 25 or 30 pairs, as I remember. And we were doing some stuff on body image. And it was interesting. At one point, we asked the mothers, and they were together at this point. We asked them about how many of you are, aware of the things you say around your daughters. And the mothers were like, "Oh, we would never say things about our bodies. We would never criticize our bodies. We know that. We're very conscious and we're very safe." We said, "That's great." And then the girls, they said, "How many of you have ever heard your moms criticize their bodies?" And every hand, both hands for many of them went up. And so I think a lot of times moms aren't aware of what they're putting out.
And even things that they are doing implicitly, words that aren't coming out of their mouths, but maybe the amount of food that they are or are not eating at the dinner table, or maybe their avoidance or hesitancy about being in a swimsuit or something like that. So it's not only the explicit words that moms are saying, which I think there is a lot of effort by moms these days to kind of watch what they say, but sometimes it shows up even more in the things that aren't said, but the things that are done.
Yeah, the behaviors. And the thing is, this is certainly not an attempt to blame moms. Moms have grown up in this kind of appearance culture. So I think once you're in that, it becomes very difficult to, even with the best of intentions, completely disregard it. But even just things like, mom can be commenting on her own body, thinking, well, it's my body. But when your child is young, your daughter is kind of seen as an extension of you. There's something called self-other overlap in the self-concept. So her self is kind of your self. So if you're disparaging your thighs or saying, "I look so awful," right, you're kind of passing those messages on. And again, that's not the intention. That's how you've been socialized, but it is something that, it'd be great if, we could sort of build that awareness into parenting.
And how do you do that? How can the mothers who are listening to this podcast, how can they become more self-aware about this issue?
Well, first of all, you can think about the things that you are saying. So in case that's an issue, there's a well-known tendency for women to engage in something called fat talk. And it's almost normative for women to do. So sometimes you actually feel like you're sticking out like a sore thumb if you don't participate, but it's kind of sharing discontent that you may have with your body, with your friends. So you want to limit the amount of things that you're saying there. But you also don't want to, engage in restrictive eating practices, for example. You don't want to limit your leisure activities based on concerns about appearance, things of that nature.
Yeah. And I think, Ashleigh, Ashleigh's expertise is in adults, and some of the initial parts of the book focus on having moms become aware of the kinds of things that might be issues for them. So you might not know, like, am I a perfectionist, or do I engage in fat talk, or how do I think about people in larger bodies, right? So just really reflecting on those things can bring some awareness to what you're doing, because like day to day, we're not thinking about those things. We just kind of go about our daily lives. And there are some really nice questionnaires and probing questions from scientifically validated instruments in the book that moms can use to sort of assess where they are on some of these things.
Things like levels of neuroticism, perfectionism, the amount of self-compassion you extend to yourself. And I found just in teaching over the years that students love learning about themselves from completing questionnaires. So, I think learning more about who you are helps you to find where those sneaky little, bad habits of poor body image might be hanging out.
Sometimes parents will ask me, or my wife and I, if you had to just pick one thing as far as how to become a better parent, what would you pick? And I think I always say, do personal growth, because we bring a lot of stuff, good and bad, some baggage to our parenting. And this is one issue where I think it would pay for moms to really do some inner kind of work to figure out where did my stuff come from, and what do I need to do to kind of work through that? Otherwise, I'm going to pass it on.
Absolutely.
It's so true. We do so much of parenting intentionally these days, like what we're going to feed our children, what we're going to let our children watch as far as media are concerned. But this is a place where I think moms can get more intentional and see a really big payoff in their children's developing body image.
I also think a lot of the book is about moms, but obviously dads have a role. My wife and I have run a lot of father-daughter retreats, grade school girls and their dads, or middle school girls and their dads, and some high school girls and their dads. And one of the things that we stress to the dads, and you can tell me if it's right or wrong, is that they have a really important role in helping their daughters learn to value their bodies for a lot more than just the way it looks. And that the comments they make and the things that they say to their daughters, the way they treat their daughters around that issue about non-physical qualities that are important. You also talk about that in your book.
Yes, that is spot on. Dads do play an important role. They're studied less, but that doesn't mean they're not important. And really, it is those principles of building for her a self that isn't based on her physical appearance and focusing on, all of her attributes and qualities, her interests, and when it comes to the body, focusing on functionality, the amazing things that your body can do, taking care of our bodies and having respect for our bodies, engaging in health behavior for our bodies, right? Because we live in our bodies, we want to treat them well. That's very different from a physical appearance focus. But we also talk about for dads, what are you modeling with respect to things like gender stereotyping? What kind of media are you consuming, and are you helping your daughter to understand that when you're seeing sexist media, for example, if you're watching sports or whatever it is that you're watching, if you're a father that engages in those things, sort of unpacking some of that with your daughter too. And, one of the barriers for dads is they can feel a little awkward talking about bodies with their daughters. But we think just by having an open dialogue, and if you don't show shame and embarrassment, then your child won't show it either. So some of that is just getting kind of comfortable with, this isn't real, or do you see what they said about that woman, or that kind of thing, and showing that things like objectifying women is not something we want to be doing, and not something that we endorse, and certainly not something that girls and women have to actually accept.
I've had a lot of girls tell me that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it's not only the way the dads talk to the girls about their bodies, but the way dads are talking about bodies more generally. And
I was going to say that I have a patient I saw a few weeks ago she's in high school, and she has two older brothers, and so she has a lot of body dissatisfaction. It comes from a lot of places, but one of the places is she's heard her older brothers, who she reveres, talking about other girls or girls in their classes and stuff, who are about their weight, about their looks, and so then she takes that on.
Absolutely. So it's also about teaching them respect, and if there are siblings in the home, we sort of address that as well. Just some general principles about, what it means to respect people as people and not focus on their bodies, and certainly avoiding things like weight talk. So research shows that, kids don't want to be told about their weight. This kind of goes across the board. There was a large study about this. It's not helpful. It's not helpful to be told that your weight is a problem. If a pediatrician has to deal with it, then there are ways to deal with it. But having parents comment and having fathers comment in some studies in particular has been shown to be damaging to girls, and has the reverse effect. Interestingly, it actually later predicts obesity. And some people think that it's because it creates a very stressful environment and may actually lead to coping behaviors that involve eating. So it's a bad idea overall. And again, it can be hard because, there's a stigma against being overweight, and parents want the best for their kids. They don't want their kid to be teased. They don't want their child to be hurt. So it may be coming from a good place, but that's not, from the data, that's not the way to really handle it optimally.
We're talking with Dr. Janet Boseovski and Dr. Ashleigh Gallagher, who both are professors at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And they just published a book literally a week ago that's called Beyond Body Positive, a Mother's Science-Based Guide for Helping Girls Build a Healthy Body Image, which I would recommend all of you get if you have a daughter. I also when I work with girls, a lot of times I also have to talk to them about function, because especially with athletes, I've had so many athletes. I had a girl a couple weeks ago who is a big time swimmer. She's I think maybe a freshman in high school, maybe a sophomore, and she's a really high level swimmer. And so she's been thinking she's fat her whole life because she's muscular. She has these big muscular thighs. And so she has these little stick figure friends who she doesn't look like. And so therefore she's fat. And I always tell them that, did you watch the Olympics, last summer? Well, yeah. I said, did you happen to watch the swimmers? Yes. What did those women swimmers from around the world look like? Well, did they look like your stick figure friends? Well, no. What they look like? Well, they had muscular thighs. They had big shoulders. And the same with gymnasts, all kinds of athletes. They think that they're fat, but it's really they're focusing on the wrong thing.
Yes, absolutely. And it's again appreciating that, you are more than your body. I mean, you're a swimmer. That's amazing. That's an amazing talent, ability, and skill to foster. And again, you're listening to these ideals that somebody else decided, right, were the ideals. Well, it says who? It says who that is the ideal. We can actually say, actually, that's not my ideal. I reject that. That's not something that I subscribe to. And I think, again, the reason we want to start this early is it's really hard once you've ingested all those messages year after year. It doesn't mean you can't fix it. Certainly you can. But by starting early with girls and developing a really strong self-concept of knowing that you're multifaceted, there's a lot going on for you as a person beyond your physical appearance, that tends to be protective then when you do encounter those kinds of things.
And you can also use those thoughts that you get about what your body looks like, those dissatisfaction thoughts. You can also learn to use those as a cue for pivoting to what the functionality is of those body parts. No, wait a second. I'm not going to think that about my thighs or my arms because those give me so much power. And those are a key component of what makes me a competitive swimmer, for example. So using those little thoughts as a cue to redirect to what the functionality is a good place to start to change body image.
Yeah. I think another place that we fall short is preparing girls who are, in grade school for how their bodies are going to change with puberty.
Yes.
Because when they get the normal weight gain and, they start to get curves, especially the first girl in the class who goes through puberty, the first and the last, I feel sorry for, because I've heard so many girls lamenting, that they get taller, they get acne, they get curves, the boys start hitting on them or making fun of them. And I think even all the girls in between, they don't understand that their bodies are changing and why.
Yeah. And, it can be just an awkward topic. So parents might want to, have the tendency to put it off. And I think some parents are shocked to hear that by 7 or 8, you should already be talking about it so that they are prepared for what's to come. Puberty emerges earlier these days. And so the idea is exactly what you're saying, which is, start having that dialogue early. And also just the idea that bodies change throughout life. All bodies change. Your body is not going to stay the same. And there are some times when your body changes really rapidly. And that's a way to sort of introduce to them this idea that, yeah, this is one big change, but all bodies change. And you can see that there are different sizes and shapes. And you'll see people at different points in time and their bodies might look different. And kind of bringing that into the dialogue early. And you can also just, there's a way where parents can kind of hint about what's to come. So one thing we've advised parents to do is work it into your daily lives. Like if you're buying deodorant at the store, you can explain to your child why you're buying that. Like, you don't need this yet, but this is what this does. And that's factual. There doesn't have to be embarrassment or shame about it. I think the issue is when we bring embarrassment or shame to it, then suddenly they're taking that in and feeling ashamed as well. So we have to do our best to not make it sound shameful. It's just the way that we grow in height. Our bodies also change. That's what happens. That's a natural biological process. Starting early, having an open dialogue, knowing who your daughter is in terms of some kids are okay with one-on-one conversations. Some kids prefer a little bit of alone time in a book and perhaps coming together and chatting too, right? So there's individual differences there as well. Yeah, and how to sort of approach it.
But I like this point that Jana makes about bodies changing continuously, because that's something that's underestimated in moms as well. Or when we talk to moms about body image. I mean, our bodies are changing. We're going through, having children or having postpartum bodies, and then maybe even going into menopausal bodies. So the body is going to be continuously changing, and helping mom think about and approach that positively as well, and not seeing that as a bad thing can be a great model for the girl who's going into puberty.
Yeah, this obsession with, the fitting into your high school jeans or whatever it is. I mean, why? Why must we aspire to fit into high school jeans, right? Like, why should that be a goal? Given that you're a different person in a different place in a different body, that's probably not the healthiest way to be thinking about, the body
Yeah.
changes in experience.
And they're out of style anyway.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. The other thing I think parents aren't aware of, and then I want to ask you what your experience is. At some of my retreats for middle school girls, high school girls in my camps, sometimes we'll have them make a list of the parts of their body that they judge negatively. Because I think we focus a lot on weight. And I can tell you after doing this for years that they don't just have weight or they have every body part that we own, earlobes and fingernails and toenails and eyelashes, eyebrows, lips, every body part is on that list. So it's not just about weight.
Yes, absolutely. It's
Um,
this idea that individual body parts, it's an objectification, right? Because you have kind of internalized what is an ideal, and you believe that your body is being judged as an object. And these various parts matter rather than the whole person. And I think that again is kind of a view that, we try to avoid that way of thinking. But I think you're right, especially in an age of social media where people's entire posts are devoted to exactly what you're talking about, like what your butt should look like, what this body part should look like. So if you're imbibing that, then yeah, suddenly you're going to notice flaws where there's no problem here, but you're looking at it and now you've decided that there's a problem. Absolutely.
how can parents, I think this is an important piece too. How can parents teach their daughters to be more image and media savvy? Because I think the media, social media, all that does play a role. And I think our daughters sometimes are more ignorant than we think they are.
Yeah, that's a hard one. The key thing is parents do need to be, especially of younger girls, like preteen, you need to be involved. That's probably annoying to hear because you're doing so much as a parent already. And now we're adding this whole other element of things you need to watch out for. The amazing thing is children are more skeptical than people give them credit for, but there are some individual differences there. So number one, and actually I loved your podcast on social media and sort of how do you know when your girl is ready? Because you really hit on nuance there with like, what is her personality? Like, is she more emotionally reactive? Is she kind of more sensitive, right? There's differences there in terms of a girl sort of taking that in and taking things personally. How much does she kind of need approval from peers and therefore looking to social media to better herself? Versus, is she more skeptical? And some kids are, like, we have kids that immediately denounce Santa and we have the Santa believers and nobody really knows why. Like there are those kids that are just, Santa's impossible. And let me explain X, Y, Z, right? Here's why. And then you have the kids that are like, I'm all for Santa and I fully believe, right? And so there are some individual differences. So first, knowing your child, knowing their personality, keeping tabs on what it is that they're ingesting, but also having dialogue that fosters critical thinking. And one of the things that we talk about is there's a development of a theory of mind, which is essentially like understanding the mental states of other people. When you see these posts, understanding the person posting this has an intention. Are they selling something? Are they trying to look a certain way? And sort of educating children about that, right? Because that gives you a different angle on what is this person trying to accomplish. They're trying to impress you. They're trying to sell something, and that kind of gives you a little sort of lead into this sort of falsehoods, right? That underlie a lot of these posts. They're not there to help you. They're there to earn money. They're there to get hits. They're not necessarily accurate. Looking at things like filters together. We have some activities that we suggest in our book around those things, just in terms of that education, but really having a dialogue about what are people intending to do. And then when it comes to celebrity culture, these people don't lead the lives we live. And I think it's super important to talk to kids about that. Like we live completely different lives from these people whose entire culture is appearance focused. That's not reality for most people. And so we shouldn't really treat it as such. So there's so many pieces there, but you're right. That is something that has to be sort of dealt with, I think, over time, like hit head on and gradually you sort of see as their critical thinking skills develop, hopefully they're picking that up. We don't have enough in the curriculum, in the school curriculum. I think that's going to change, but I think we definitely need a much more sort of structured set of lessons around how to absorb all this information that thank goodness none of us had to grow up with. Yeah.
I've seen research that shows that when parents, I think some of it's even particularly dads, when they sit down and watch TV shows with their daughters or movies or things like that with their daughters, and then stop and start and comment. And those are great moments to
Yes.
to sort of give that kind of education. So it's like, what are you seeing? What do you think about that? Why do you think they would act that way?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
There's some really cool research too. I think it's with college age women, but it looks at it takes there's this influencer who kind of recreates like dramatic fashion shoots and kind of unrealistic portrayals of women's bodies, and does it in a playful way, not a mean or poor intentioned way, but basically kind of playing around with how unrealistic this is, playing around with like, this is not what real life is like. So I think just teaching girls to not take the things they see on social media so seriously, but to not only critically think about them, but play with those ideas a little bit too. This is silly.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I want to look like this?
We're talking today with Dr. Ashleigh Gallagher and Dr. Janet Boseovski. They're professors at UNC Greensboro in North Carolina, and they have just published a book called Beyond Body Positive, a mother's science-based guide for helping girls build a healthy body image. One of the things that I saw in your book that I thought was interesting was that there's a difference between loving your body and respecting it. Can you talk about that for a moment?
I think it's just unrealistic for some women, not all women, but to say, wow, I just really love my body. I'm very positive about it. Obviously, it's great when that happens. And, we want to encourage people to be positive about their bodies as well. But I think that it's also a good development if someone can get to thinking about their body just more neutrally without an evaluation. Again, championing what the important functions are that your body does, but to kind of take the pressure off of appearance and to put it on, other aspects of yourself. So one of the things we want to do is not necessarily talk in terms of body positivity or even body neutrality. We want to say, let's think about our bodies less proportionally than we think about aspects of our character or our accomplishments or the things that we don't know how to do right now, but that we're excited to learn how to do.
So in that moment in their life, they may not be able to love their body, but they can certainly not focus on it and focus on the negative parts. And they can focus on things that we all know, or I think we all know, that are more important than just their looks, even though the culture is saying the opposite.
Right.
I think. You also talk in the book in several places about the value of self-compassion when it comes to body dissatisfaction. So can you all comment on that too, please?
Self-compassion has so many benefits. And we're often our worst critics, especially girls who are emerging from childhood and going into their adolescent years. So cutting ourselves a break and talking to ourselves like we would a valued friend. I mean, if we heard our friend picking on her body, and even girls do this in childhood, they say, "Oh, that's not true. You're," and they highlight a aspect of the girl that they like. And so if we could learn to behave toward ourselves like that, we have a thought that's anxious about how we look, but we say, you know what, I'm going to cut myself a break on that because, I have so many other aspects of myself that are awesome. It's okay if I'm not perfect.
And it's also that, you have the thought, but you can also say, like, I don't know that this is true, right? I've had this thought, but I think something that's very profound that comes out of this self-literature is don't believe everything you think. That's something that Dr. Mark Leary talks about in a book called The Curse of the Self, right? We overthink everything. And what is the objective reality of this, right? You think this, but is somebody else walking on the sidewalk and they looked at your thighs and thought, oh my goodness, this is horrendous? Probably not. These are the stories we tell ourselves. And we can also just choose to have the thought and say, I'm going to let this go, right? Rather than harp on it. But I'm also going to sort of accept there's common humanity, understanding that everybody has these insecurities. Everybody feels bad about themselves every so often. And that also takes it away a little bit in terms of that impact, because you just realize that's a natural thing and I don't have to harp on it. I can just say, okay, I had that thought and I can move on from that thought.
I teach girls, and there's an old maxim, I guess you'd call it, that we're not in control of whether or not a bird lands on our head, but we are in control of whether or not we allow it to build a nest.
Yes.
So when those thoughts about dissatisfaction with their bodies pop up, like you say, they can learn to catch it and understand what it is, and then to reframe it or to move on from it or something so that they don't end up ruminating it into this big story.
And we would love to see moms model for girls this attitude of being your body's champion and defender. So I'm not going to have those thoughts about my body. I mean, the world out there is prepared to give us all kinds of negative feedback about ourselves. But if we can see ourselves as the protector of and the advocate of our body, then that's really empowering, I think.
We're talking today with Dr. Janet Boseovski and Dr. Ashleigh Gallagher, who are professors of psychology at UNC Greensboro. And they just published a book called Beyond Body Positive, a mother's science-based guide for helping girls build a healthy body image. Towards the end of the book, you have some exercises of things that parents can do with their daughters. And one of my favorites, which I'm going to steal, I think, and use for one of my retreats, if it's okay, is the one about writing positive body messages like on the mirror or with sticky notes. Can you explain that one for our listeners?
Yeah. So when you look in the mirror, it seems like one challenge that girls face is immediately zeroing in on the things that are wrong. And so the mirror is a great place. And, I've seen moms leave little notes of affirmation for their daughters on the mirror, like, you are so awesome. I think you're talented at so many things. Put those on the mirror. But if we could do those for ourselves and put up there things that we like about ourselves to counteract what we may be tempted to think when we look in the mirror, it can change the dread perhaps that a girl senses when she is being evaluative of herself in the mirror.
Yeah, this was based loosely on some research that showed that, the comments that mom is making in the mirror, if she's making disparaging comments, then and her daughter is exposed to that, her daughter is likely to pick up on the same things, versus if she's focusing on positive things that, again, are bringing out various aspects of the self, then the daughter's also encouraged to sort of look beyond the appearance piece and also think about other elements and also point out positive things that she likes about herself, right? It's kind of a reorienting of the self in that sense.
Yeah. So as we wind down our conversation, and this is not fair, but if you had to sort of pick out one thing you'd like for parents to, and especially moms, to take away from this conversation about their daughters and body image, what would that be? And you can have different thoughts if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we talk a lot about agency and the idea that you can be intentional about shaping body image. So society is throwing all these things, the media is throwing all these things at you, random strangers are making comments about what you're eating, what you're wearing, how you look, they're telling you what, routine you need to do and so on and so forth. And what we're saying is you can, from the ground up, protect yourself and build, a more complex self that protects you from all of this. And you have the agency to decide, right? What is the right way to approach it for you? Maybe social media is okay for you. Maybe it isn't. Maybe exposure to certain kinds of people that you hang out with maybe doesn't serve you well, but these other kinds of people do serve you well in terms of what is their focus, what are their interests, what do they value about you? And so we really feel that by taking agency and intentionality, we get to have a say. And I think women have felt for so long that we're pulled in every which direction, right? Body trends change. This year, the trend is the clavicle, another year, the trend is the butt. I mean, all these ridiculous things telling us what it is that we need to be doing. And we're saying, actually, we are in the driver's seat. We can sort of take control and we can protect our daughters by sort of building this from the ground up early on.
Yeah. At one point we were thinking of the, kind of metaphor of being the CEO of your own, the manager of your own body image. So I do love that agency piece. And that's one of my favorites as well. But another one is that I think moms can downplay their importance in young girls' minds. There's so much coming out from, peers and from media. And moms may feel like, they don't have that much influence over their daughters. But in truth, we know from the research that moms have a great deal of influence on their young daughters. And in fact, they're the chief and primary influencer in those
moms
early
are the
years.
influencer. Yeah.
So just like, teenage girls might be following someone online and hanging on their every word or recommendation for products, little girls are doing that with mom in the early years. And that is so valuable when you realize that and you think, we can really capitalize on this and use this time and this influence wisely to help a girl build a strong, healthy self-image.
Well, thank you so much for writing the book, and thanks so much also for coming on the podcast. How can parents find the book?
So the book is available on Amazon, and it's also available on the American Psychological Association website, and it is out now. So they're certainly welcome to have a look. And there's a sample chapter as well that they can look at on both of those websites. Yeah.
And you're always welcome to contact us via email. Our emails are in the book. So we love talking about this, and
Absolutely.
you're welcome to contact us as well.
Yes.
So I will put those links to the book and also to both of you, so that if parents want to do that, they can. So that'll be in the show notes. So make sure you check that at my website, at drtimjordan.com. Thank you again so much for coming on, and thank you for your work. It's so important. I think we blame sometimes the wrong people. I think sometimes I think friends have a huge influence. I think the social media, all that does. But I think for parents to point the arrow at themselves and have more self-awareness is a really huge piece that you've given to parents. So thanks so much.
Thank
It's a
you.
pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that was an interesting discussion. It's an interesting book. There's so much data out there. And these two women, these two doctors, have put together a lot of good studies to back up what they're saying, and also have lots of interesting things you can do with your daughters, and especially young daughters. Their book is geared a lot for kind of age 3 to 10, they say, but it's for any age. But there's exercises and things you can do to start increasing your awareness, your part in it, and also things you can do as far as conversations with your daughters all along the way. So I appreciate them being on the show. And again, the information about their book and about them and how to get a hold of them will be on my show notes. Thanks again for stopping by here. This is an interesting and an important topic about girls' body image and their body dissatisfaction. So I hope this was helpful. I will be back here in a week with another brand new podcast. Thanks again, as always, for stopping by.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Raising Daughters. Hopefully you've learned something useful about girls and young women and how to help them navigate the pressures, challenges, and opportunities of modern life. If you want to become a more effective parent, keep listening to the show at drtimjordan.com and let the conversations shape you. Build that one-of-a-kind connection with your daughters in the most profound and meaningful ways possible, shaping them into strong, confident women of the future. That's all for now. See you next week for another episode of Raising Daughters.